This meeting is being live streamed. Now it says it is.
Yeah, we're
So
connected.
now if we went to YouTube, what we're seeing right now is literally being streamed live, or is it just a holding screen?
It is totally being streamed live.
So the people in the webinar aren't seeing anything, but if somebody's on YouTube, they're watching it.
Yes.
And one crazy rigging enthusiast in the middle of Kazakhstan is interested in that's watching us now.
Yeah. All right, here, I'm gonna mute myself and then I'll hit start webinar here. We got 2 minutes, Rich. You want
Yeah,
me to
we'll
open the
wait.
doors or you wanna wait?
Yeah, no, that's fine. We won't be able, I won't be able to see her, and people aren't going to be able to talk, right? They're just going to be there.
No, just in chat,
So
yeah.
you and I can chat. So I'm not sitting here talking to myself um, until it's time. But you can feel free to open it up. There are no attendees. Ah, Matt. Oh, look at that. Welcome, welcome.
All right, Rich.
Yeah,
It's
let's get
uh
going.
it's almost time.
Yeah. So we'll this is the pre-show. We haven't haven't kicked everything off yet. But the for everybody listening, I see, basically Kyle, Matt, and Jason. This is as much a trial run of figuring it all out and getting it all going as anything. And then over time, this will get refined. We'll figure our rhythm and what we're going to show and everything else. So this is as much a tech check as anything else. Um, we'll wait another minute or two for people to show up. And for anybody that has any questions, just put them into the chat while the webinar is going on. And people from the Ozone team will answer as best they can. Chat is disabled. All right, you got to turn that on there, Kai.
I see that. Let's see if we can. Give me a second.
Mhm. And then once you give me the green light, Kai, we'll get rocking. We need like background music. We'll have to figure that out next time. We need some music.
All righty, Rich. I think we're good to go. I'll just say hi to everybody over there. And
All right. Awesome.
chat should be enabled, so we're good now. Sorry about that, guys.
Hey, Matt and Kyle. Yeah, so consider this a trial run. Like I said, we're gonna keep doing these. But here, let's just get rocking. So I'm gonna share my screen. We'll go here. So welcome to the very first, and hopefully the first of many training webinars that we're gonna do talking about ozone. And today is going to be an introduction, a real basic overview. I'm going to assume that if you're watching this, you haven't seen anything about what ozone is. We'll start from there and then we'll grow. So let's see if that goes. So what are the goal? What's the goal for the series? And the basic goal is that we're going to cover not only what ozone is and the technology, but we're going to look at every component that makes up the tool set and teach people how to not only understand how rigs and characters are built technically, but also go into the artistic use of those rigs. So how to get the most out of, say, a mouth rig, an eye rig, a human rig, whatever it is. So it'll be both, what are the steps to use the thing? How do you make great shapes out of these things? As well as looking at bigger picture projects and how we can take something from beginning all the way through the pipeline and deliver characters for final production. So it will evolve over time. Expect to get feedback from everybody and kind of grow from there. The first part we're going to cover is what is Ozone. What I'm going to do is kind of go through what we consider our standard demo, which some of you may or may have not seen over time, and kind of cover that here. Then we're going to talk a little bit about how Ozone is different and how we approach the rigging, basically the shapes in motion problem, different than the traditional methods that you're used to. And then we're going to look at the new Ozone UI inside of Maya, and we're just going to look at some of the basics. From there, we'll have a QA session where people can ask questions and get things going. So, um, looking at people on my Slack asking questions. How funny. So all right, let's go ahead and jump into the start. So I always start the demo with this character here. So this is Zoe, a little test character that we created. And the first thing we like to talk about is, Ozone is a standalone deformation technology that allows you to rig your character once and animate it anywhere. This represents that here in Unreal. So what we're looking at is a character that is not an Alembic. This is not an FBX. This is not a skeletal mesh. This is an Ozone asset driven by the Ozone plugin live inside of Unreal. And another point is that this face rig that you're looking at, there are no joints or blend shapes in this face. So it's a different way of looking at the shapes in motion problem. Now, because we control this completely, we were able to bring real-time subdivs into Engine. So now, right from the very beginning, when we think about building characters and building characters at scale, allows our rigging artists to deal with far fewer points. And, what does that mean in a practical sense? That means that our artists, we zoom in here a little bit, can deal with this many points, right? Looking at that many points, but at render time, you can have this many points. And the subdivs are real time. They execute at the microsecond level. So this is good for games, interactive presentations, as well as virtual production where we're using a game engine for rendering. More importantly, it means that when we're thinking about building characters, this sparse cage means a lot less rigging. We're moving less points around. We're dealing with less weighting. It's easier to make changes, take art direction, everything else. Now, this character was animated in Maya and brought down into Unreal. I have another example here. So we're going to go and look at this. So here's another little test animation that we have. So this is a little mushroom puppy. And the way this works is that we have three components. We have our blueprint inside of Unreal, which basically represents the plugin. It's a very similar to what we're going to show you in Maya here in a second. We have the Ozone file. So this is our description of a character. And when you put these two together, you end up with a character that's dropped into Unreal that's ready to be animated. Now, this workflow, we're using our animation clip system to basically replace Alembics and use Unreal for virtual production rendering. But you could attach Control Rig to this, animate it live, and use it in a game or an interactive presentation. And it's exactly the same rig here as we're going to show you in Maya. Now, to talk about this workflow from a virtual production point of view, a lot of times Alembics is how you bring complex deformations out of other environments and bring it into the game engine for rendering. But this is not an Alembic. Now, we did a test and we baked this character out as an Alembic, and this little 30-second animation was around 265 megabytes. With our clip format, it's only 13 megabytes. It's 90% smaller. And that's because it's a live rig in Unreal, and all we have to do is send the animation data down and apply it. And of course, you get real-time subdivs. So that means that you also get resolution independence for your rendering without carrying the weight of all those vertices in your Alembics as you're bringing down. It's sort of a double whammy. So now, oh, should I move these guys over there? Okay. So here is that same asset running inside of Maya, right? So what we're doing here is we're using an off-the-shelf puppeting system. We're using M-Gear. Thank you, Miguel. For driving this character. So what that means is it's a standard Maya control rig that we've swapped the Ozone or the skin weights, the Maya skin weights off and brought Ozone deformers on. Think about that control rig, M-Gear, as a scaffold. We're hanging the deformers on. And the way this works is, let me go here and we'll find our Ozone node. We'll bring it in. So let's get rid of extraneous nodes. So we come and we look at this, right? As far as Maya's concerned, I grabbed the wrong ozone node. Give me a second here. This is the one that I wanted to actually look at. Where are we? Here we go. Um, this has all of the avars in it. Or is it? No, it's this guy right here. So give me a second. I'm nothing like a live demo to make some mistakes in. Um, So yeah, here we go. So this node, as far as Maya is concerned, represents the deformer, and all of the deformations that are inside of ozone are carried by this one node, right? So if I come down and I look at this, all of these inputs represent all of the matrix inputs for joints, all of the floats or sliders or elements that are dragging around to drive deformers, and it's all contained in a single node. So that means all of this stuff, the control rig itself, lives here on the left and wires into the ozone node. This accomplishes a couple of things. First off, it means that you don't have to change all of your animation controls or your animation pipeline for users in your studio to take advantage of ozone. With a little bit of glue, you can swap out the Maya skin weights, bring in ozone, and your animators can continue to work the way they've been working. Also, we play nicely with others because we are just and deformer inside of Maya. We can coexist with characters that are driven by regular skin weights and everything else, and they can live in the scene at the same time. Whenever you're baking the animation out, in this case, and bringing it down into Unreal, we actually bake it at our node. This also means that you can have any kind of proprietary nodes, puppeting system, anything that you want on this side, and we bake it down. And then when we come down into Unreal or anywhere else Ozone has been ported, you get a one-for-one pixel perfect representation of the animation that you had in Maya, in this case, in Unreal. So it's a very flexible thing, and we'll talk about how this works in production when I show some stuff from Supergiant Robot Brothers here in a minute. So what does this do for us? What the first thing it does is it gives us the ability to expand the deformation toolbox that you have access to. So in most cases, if you're working on taking something from, say, Maya and bring it into a game engine like Unreal, you're working with the lowest common denominator. You're dealing with joints, you're dealing with blend shapes, right? Well, with Ozone, because we control the deformation stack completely, we expand that toolbox. Now you can have a slide on a curve. You can have a parametric bend. You can have all kinds of other deformation effects that live in this asset, and everything you see here in Maya is going to run in Unreal. Now, one thing, because we're a company of rigging artists that are building a rigging tool, we take a look at old ideas like, say a joint chain, and we're able to make basic ideas better. What does that mean? So if we think about, a wrist, you've got up and down, you've got your left and right. And then when you twist, right, you average your weight down your arm. Now, in a traditional setup, you'd have a joint here, then you'd have another joint right up at the base, one, if not two joints in the forearm to average your weights out. So an arm might have 6, 9, 12 joints in it, right? But with Ozone, you can have separate weight maps for each axis of rotation. So what you're seeing here with this wrist is one joint and 3 weight maps, and you're getting all of this. We're solving real problems for real artists, which is shoulders, wrists, hips, and ankles, making that job much, much easier. In this shoulder, again, there's no blend shapes in here. We're dealing with just raw weights and a different weight for each axis of rotation. And really what this shows and what we're going to get into as we go into more of these series is Ozone allows you to do more on your surface with less rigging. So this means that you can put more detail, forward on the character without having to have all of that complexity in the rig. So here we have a joint here for the head. I'm going to go ahead and open up the Ozone panel, and we'll look at this in detail a bit more later on in the webinar. But let's look at this. So now if I look at my mouth here and I open this up, right, come up and down, this is sliding along a curve. We've actually authored a curve, and the mouth is sliding up and down that. If we look at it here, we can slide the mouth left and right along another curve. Now for this character, this means that all the way here, from the very front down all the way here, it's just 2 deformers. There are no joints in this area. So we're able to do a whole lot on this surface using 2 deformers. Now we look over here and we have a joint on the tail, but then I also have a parametric bend allowing me to bend this up and down. There's no string of pearls here. There's not a bunch of joints. It's a single line and a single weight map for that. And all of what I've just shown you, slides, moves, bends, rotates, they all work nicely together, right? They're all working together here. Now, if we come back into Unreal, we can take a look at kind of a science project. So here's a magic carpet. And what you're looking at here, there are no joints, there are no blend shapes, right? We're looking at 9 deformers that have been added together, stacked up with animated weights to create a performance that would be very difficult to do in the traditional way. Not impossible, but really, really difficult. And it was a very simple thing to do here in Ozone, right? So let's take a look at that. We'll open up our character here in Maya. All right. So how does this work? Doo-doo-doo-doo. Loading times in live demos. All right. So let's go ahead and open up our Ozone panel here. Okay. So let's take a look at this guy, right? So right away, we'll start with we can roll the front part of this carpet up, right? I can roll that up. I can come in here and I can tighten that edge to give it like a little parchment feel. I can do the same thing with the back. I can roll this up and I can tighten this up, right? I can tighten that down. Now, Ozone is an order of operations based system, and I'm going to get into this a little bit more in the next part of the webinar. But the idea is that you have a stack of deformers that are executing in a line, right? One goes to the next, goes to the next. But all those deformers are live all the time. So when I come here and I look at shifting this forward and backward, right? What I'm doing is actually translating that through these bend spaces because the translation, the forward and backward, is executing before the curls, right? Again, I want you to be thinking about what this would take to do in a traditional way. Not impossible, just a lot harder. Now, what we can also do is we can animate our weights. Well, what does that mean practically? So if we look here, I can add this ripple into my carpet, right? This is actually a single translate. I'm just pushing upward, and then I have a weight map that defines where that ripple or where that translate goes. And then I'm attenuating or animating the weight, or modulating is probably a better word, based on a sine wave, right? So now if I do this, I can animate the sine wave, right? And it makes it look like the carpet's rippling. Now, everything you're seeing here with this ripple, again, is one deformer. I can do a lot more with a lot less. Another fun thing here is because we're dynamically changing the weights, you can see that the front part of this carpet is unaffected, right? So I go here and I do that. Now, if I go and I curl this up, what you can see is I'm subtracting away the ripple from the top of this carpet, right? What does this mean practically? This means that because I can take away rigging or, deformers and bring them back in, my animators can not have to worry about the front silhouette of their carpet. They can set the ripple, roll the carpet up and roll the carpet back out and not have to fight against the rig. And again, everything you're seeing here, I'm doing with 9 deformers, right? A lot more with a lot less. Now let's take all these pieces and bring them together. So I'm going to come here and we'll look at D, one of our characters, little test characters. And you can tell this is live because I'm not pulling loading things out of the oven, Julia Childs style. So we'll load this up. When I'm in a room full of people, I can start, getting reactions. This is like talking to a mirror. Come on, Schwartz, you can load. Oh yeah, this is taking a lot of time. There we go. All right, so we have our character here. Let me pull the glasses off here. This is, again, I'm using M gear to pull this together, but all the deformers are all blah, blah, they're all ozone. All right, so let's go to. I'm actually going to use the M gear picker here. So what this illustrates is that, again, if you have a control interface, whether it's little sliders on the rig, or in this case, I'm using little pickers and sliders in the channel box, it doesn't really matter. We are just the deformers, and we have inputs, and however your outputs can be wired into our inputs means you can use whatever control interface you want. All right, so let's take a look at the brow here. So if we look at our brow coming up and down, right, This is a single curve, the brow sliding up and down, right? And then the in, the mid, and the out is I'm animating the weights of that one deformer to create the shaping on the brow, right? This is not a whole bunch of joints and a whole bunch of under the hood stuff. It's one deformer sliding and I'm animating the weights. Again, I'm doing more work with less rigging. If we come here, we can look at our lids. We can open these up. I can shift these over left and right. Now I've kept the FPS up here so it can keep me honest, so you guys can see we're getting, between 25 and 40 frames a second. And honestly, from a speed perspective, we're really just getting started. I expect to get a solid 60 across the board when we're done with our latest efforts. All right, so let's get this. I can take the mouth. I can move the mouth up and down, right? Kind of do this. And you can see just kind of how much the surface comes alive. Part of the reason that that happens is because each deformer can have its own weight map, and each weight map adds to itself. So what this means is it's not a subtractive system. So let's do a thought experiment here, right? I take the mouth corner up here, and let's say that I want to adjust this cheek. In a joint-based setup, if you're not dealing with whole in and out meshing and a whole bunch of other stuff, to add an effect, you've got to bring a joint into the system that takes away from work that you've done. With Ozone, you don't have to do that. I can think of the cheek as its own idea. I can think of the mouth corner up as its own idea, as it over, it's its own idea. If we think about the jaw, right, when I want to open this up, this is its own idea. That means I can broaden that effect. We come up here and we look at the front here, or her temple, right? You see that I'm getting all kinds of little micro movements because I can feather the weights all the way up to her temple. I'm not worried about breaking the eyelids or the brows or any of the rigging around here. I think about this jaw as one idea. There's no free lunch. You've got to make sure everything connects in together, but it is so much more freeing to be able to think about these as individual ideas instead of fighting against a control structure under the hood. And then the lips here, these are the same kind of thing we did with the brow. It's a single weight, or single deformer, and I'm animating the weights of that, right? And everything you see here, this entire face rig works the same in Unreal. So if we come in here and let's come to the actual correct desktop. All right. Let's bring up D. So here we can look at the same character, the exact same rig, but with all the shading, groom, and everything else here running in Unreal, right? And again, this is all live. What you're looking at is running live, right? So we come in here, I can adjust my sub D levels on the fly, right? What you're seeing, which could be considered a final render coming out of a standard renderer, I'm getting in engine in real time. And everything is live and editable, right? So if I come here and let's say I look at the jaw, I can open the jaw here and I can mung this open, can swing this left and right. Everything is still active. This thing could be animated directly in Unreal if I wanted to, because it's the Ozone engine and Ozone deformers being driven live inside of Unreal, right? So here, let's look at a little test animation with this. So this is a shot from the short film we're working on. Mark Walsh is our director. Hope that we will be able to get that film done here one of these days. But here's a shot from that, right? Again, everything here is real time and live, right? So in our opinion, this means that the quality bar for what you'd expect from an animated feature or TV show, you can now bring into your game and your interactive, and it's the same character in both places, and you're going to get the same quality, right? Now, our first real engagement in the industry was with we partnered up with Real Effects. Mark Andrews was the director. It was a show called Supergiant Robot Brothers, done for Netflix. And this show was 10 episodes, 5,000 shots, and 150 characters, and they're all powered by Ozone. Some metrics that make sense is that because our rigs run in real time in Maya as well as Unreal, the animation group was able to produce 20 to 30% more animation or footage per week. And they never had a shot in Unreal that took longer than 90 seconds to load, because we're not dealing with Olympics. These things load incredibly fast, allowing lighting artists and layout artists and everybody to work really, really fast. So you're going to hear some audio when I play it.
That's a Roger. Twister, obliterator, activated!
Oop.
But
That's
you,
me.
sir, are chunky.
right?
Was a process of recycling
Right, and you
through
see
a
this is
free
all
program with some
real
funny
geometry, just
You were
shades that
right
look
this
cartoony.
whole time. I'm a gorgeous failure. A red hot nothing. That's
Right. And one thing that I think is important for us to kind of talk about that hopefully is obvious is that Ozone is a general rigging solution, right? So this means that we can rig anything, a creature, a cartoon character, a car, suspension, giant robot, photoreal, certainly. It doesn't matter. We're not a one-trick pony. This gives you the freedom to rig whatever you want, and we can be creative, right? So this is a little test we did for, with Lego here. And of course, you can see with subdivs that it's perfectly smooth. But the face rig here is actually a 3D face rig that's being rendered with an orthographic real-time camera off to the side in Unreal and driving and pushing that a texture, if you will, directly into a UDIM. What this means, though, is everything is still live. So if we come in here and I go and I look at my browse here, this is all live. I'm able to dynamically adjust and pull this together, right? I can do all kinds of fun shaping with this. And because we're dealing with deformers and normalized animation values, what this means is that we can build in this case, a Lego rig and have all kinds of different rig setups, facial setups, and dynamically switch them between characters and reuse animation from all of them. Now, you never get 100%, but if you could get 80% from your animation library, think about the time you can save, right? Let me show you how this works here. So this is right, here's that. It's a multi-plane little face rig. We're tricking it out with rendering, and this is where it actually gets done. So anyway, that is that right there. So just basic overview. This is something I've shown a few times in the past out there, but I figured we would get started with people seeing sort of a background of what Ozone is. Ultimately, what we're trying to build is the best rigging tool that's ever been made to give you the best and the highest quality shapes anywhere so that you can rig your character once, animate it in any environment you want, and never have to worry about quality or if it's going to run in real time. That's the goal for Ozone. Also, because we're a bunch of rigging artists that started a rigging company, is to make it as easy as possible for people to take advantage of this technology and bring it into their own pipelines. We want to solve problems today for artists that are working right now, as well as we have a plan for the future, which again, we'll talk about in future webinars. Okay, so let's take a look at, what makes Ozone a bit different. Let me, we'll open up a scene here. You guys can look at my baldness while I get this up and running. Give me 1 second. All right. So what are the three concepts? We talked a little bit about them, right? The first one we're an order of operations based system, right? This means that, we have one deformer that executes and does what it's going to do. And then you have a second deformer that does what it's going to do, and a third and fourth and so on. Each one of those deformers can have their own independent weight maps so that every deformer can have its own effect that's broad and then adds to the next. And then, of course, we looked at the carpet and we can talk about animated weights. But right at its core, order of operations is at the key of what we're doing. So let me show you a little example here. I don't need to optimize for this stuff now. So here is what I call the order of operations teapot, right? It's a simple example, and hopefully this gives you guys an idea of what we're talking about, right? So if I think about this as an idea, I've got three deformers here. I've got a bend, I've got a move, and I've got a rotate. Depending on the order in which they execute will give me a different behavior, right? So in this case, I have a bend, then I got to translate, and then I have a rotate. And if I come in here and I bend this, let's do that, right? So now I can bend this, right? So I have my bend, and then I can move it, right? So I can move it up and down, and then I can rotate it, right? Rotating it around. So three deformers in that order. Now, if I change the order in which this executes, right? So let's do this. Now I'm going to execute where I'm going to translate, then I'm going to bend, and then I'm going to rotate. So what does that look like? Well, this means that now when I move this up, when I bend, it's going to look like it's curling down because it is. So what's happening is it's translating and then it's bending, right? and the bend or the move stays live, right? So now you can see that I can push this through here, right? Curl it down a little bit more, right? And then the rotate is firing afterwards, right? But let's say we come here and I switch it to, I want the rotate to execute before the translate. Now, when I rotate, it's going to look like it's curling in that space, right? So the point, the takeaway is by just changing the order, um, it's funny, I can't see sorry, we're in test mode here. Kai, you sent me something. Oh, I don't see that. I don't see the chat, guys, so I can't see the things without maybe Kai, you can tell me something or something live.
Yeah, I'll interrupt you if we need to, Rich. We got the
Okay.
chat. Kyle,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
was
yeah.
curious if that was D or not. I think he was on D. Okay, cool. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
chat.
Sorry. So yeah, again, this is our shakedown. You guys get to be the inaugural customer slash viewers here. So what the point really is just that I didn't change any rigging at all. I didn't change any weighting. I didn't change anything. All I did was change the order in which these deformers executed. And I got three very different results. So if you think about that and extrapolate it out, it means from a flexibility standpoint, I can find shapes in motion. I can discover ways of moving things around to give me the results I want without having to rip apart and rebuild and destroy a whole layer of control structure underneath to make that work, right? So here, let's go into here. So let's talk about weight maps. So here's our little test character Zoe here, and let's think about weight maps. So I'm going to come. We're going to look at the jaw, and if we think about this here, right? Here is the weight map for the jaw open, right? And the swing, the twist, all of these. Now I've copied these weights and I've made them the same, but they all can be independent, right? Actually, you know what might be a good example of this? No, this is fine. We'll do it here. So I can turn this weight map off. Let's do this. So let me go and Avar. Kind of jumping ahead on my demo, but hey, that's what you do here, right? So here's my jaw open, and then I'm gonna do let's do this one. Do that. I'll enable override, right? And this one's working. You go. Yeah, man, this is fun demo. I need to adjust this so that we get that there. Okay, and I'll explain what I'm doing here when we talk about it. But so now I'm looking at this, right? So essentially, these are the same weights, right? I have my up and down, and I have my front and back. But let's say I wanted to change this, and we'll do something gross. So I'm going to go in here, and I'm just going to grab these points. We'll do something really ugly, right? And I'm just going to set their weights to 0. So now, if I look at this, right, not pretty, but what I've done is I've changed, and now the forward and backward weighting is different than my up and down weighting. Now the power in this is that because these weight maps are overlapped, is that I can make specific changes to specific axes depending on what my animator or my production needs. And for the animators that are watching, this system allows you to have really, really tight, specific control over your shapes in a way that doesn't kill your rigging artist. Your rigging artist can make these changes because of the design of the system in a much more efficient way. Now, of course, there are always deadlines. You get to a point where changes can't happen, but it's much further down the road now. And when you say, hey, when I move this, forward, if I wanted to say move the base of the nose more, right, I can now come in here and I can say, hey, add, right, let's go ahead and just add some weight into this, right? So I can start tweaking this out. Clearly, I am fumbling all over the place. We'll tune this out for the one we do on Friday. Right. So now and again, ugly, but the example is I'm able to do something with the nose for the forward and backward that I don't do with my up and down. Right? So now you really can broaden out effects and get really specific shapes in motion. And this is the idea of independent weight maps for each deformer. And then we looked at the magic carpet. So we looked at what that means from an animated weight standpoint. So, all right. So this was going to be my next scene. So let me go ahead and stop the share here real quick. All right, so give me 1 second. I'm gonna rebuild this scene and we'll come up. I do have another character to show, which will be fun. Maybe I'll do that instead. Um, all right, so let's talk about this here. Give me 1 second, guys. We definitely need music. I think there needs to be some kind of soundtrack in the background that makes this work better. All right, let me bring Zoe back up and we'll go through this exactly. So the next step is I want to talk about the Ozone interface, the UI. I kind of poked around it a little bit, but I'm going to explain it a bit, what's happening here and why. So if we think about Ozone being a independent deformation system, right? It's its own separate entity. You need a way to go and access that data and be able to manipulate that data so that you can do your rigging. So our panel is basically like that's like a window. It allows you to pull data out and push data back in. Everything that we're doing in our UI is being done or driven through our Python layer. So for the pipeline people out there, everything I'm showing you in the UI can be done as a script. Everything that I'm doing in Maya, you can do in the shell and through the command line. So you can basically import Ozone and run and batch and deal with, hundreds of characters at a time. Our file format is based on JSON, so that it's super human readable. We have a binary version of the format, which is basically compressed JSON just for size. But the idea from the very beginning was to develop a system that was as pipeline friendly as possible so that you can write your own tools in your productions to manipulate and manage Ozone assets as we go. All right, so we're loaded up. Let's get this bad boy here and I will share my screen. If it will let me share my screen. All right. Where'd you go? Oh, how funny. Maya decided that it wanted to crash. Wasn't that the most fun thing to have happen in a demo? All right. Let's try that again. This is a character that we're working on with Henson. It wasn't what I intended to show, but you know what? Screw it. We're just gonna fly by the seat of our pants here. So let's talk about the UI and how it's structured. So this is our window into the asset. And each one of these elements is a module, right? We have brows, lids, eyes, nose, jaw, mouth. We've got arms and legs. So we have a library of these modules that get assembled and put together that you can bring in to build your own characters. And you have access to all these modules. So all the rigs I'm going to show you here, you have access to. So we deliver not only the technology, but we deliver the rigs as well. So in this case, let's say I wanted to adjust, say, the jaw weighting. So I'm gonna go here and let's just turn off our shading here. And we'll hide our joints just so we're looking at the mouth, right? So here's our mouth. So if I come into my jaw module, you can see that I've got this list. So green is our animation channels, AVARs, we call them. The yellow is fitting. These are the elements that describe the points of rotation or a curve that things slide on, or whatever. It's all the elements that give a path or direction or an axis for things you're working on. Blue is weights. So here are all your weight maps. And then the red color is for sculpts. Now, sculpts is our term for blend shapes. And we'll talk about blend shape. There's some of our webinars in the future, we're going to talk about techniques and how to use deformers and everything else. But the takeaway, the way Ozone is designed, is that we flip the script. Right now, most fancy, or fancy is not the right word, but detailed face rigs are 80% blend shape corrections and sculpt, modeling, with 20% that are deformers and or joint or whatever. Ozone is exactly the opposite. We do 80 to 90% of our motion with deformers, sliding on a curve, rotating, whatever it is. And then we use blend shapes, we call them sculpts, to deal with volume and for tightening up edges, making things look pretty. So most of the movement happens with deformers. What this means is it's much easier to take rigging from one character to the next and have it hold up. Characters can now be driven much bigger. That means your animators can exaggerate these characters much further, and they don't break as often. Animators can always break a rig. Let's be real here. But the fact is they can go further with it. And from an artistic standpoint, because I'm doing more of it with deformers, it's easier for me to manage the complexity. I can make changes to one thing without destroying other things. and I can make sure that things add up nicely and then just sweeten it with the blend shape. So again, that's why we call them sculpts, and that's a real Brian Tyndall thing there. So okay, let's talk about this, right? So here I have my jaw, right? But if I wanted to edit where my jaw UD is working, I'd grab this jaw UD here and I can pull the fitting out of the file, right? So I pull my rig fitting out, and what'll happen is I'll come here to my rig, and now I have a locator, right? That sits up here. And now I can live move this and edit that pivot, right? So now if I come in here and I move it, I can dynamically adjust where my mouth is working. So I can literally be playing with how I want my jaw to look. Now, what does this mean? Especially for anybody in animation watching. This means that your animator and your rigging artist can sit in the same room at the same time and work out the feel of the character together. When I'm opening up my jaw, the rigging artist can be, okay, well, what's right? What's feeling right? Where do you want this to move? Where do you want this to be? And you get the character feeling, tightening up that loop. That's usually rigging, sending things over the fence to animation, and then animation trying things and sending them back, and dun 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 dun. Now you can do this in a live session. You can work out the core movement, the mechanics of a face or a body, all live and in real time, saving you time. And also, more importantly, building that animation and rigging relationship to make sure that the animator is getting the performance they want and they understands the needs of the rigger at the same time. So I guess in a way, Ozone's sort of like character art therapy. But really, it comes down to this is a live element allowing me to edit it, right? Now, also, if we think about, say, let's use the drop. So this is a up and down. I'm going to grab this locator here and let's pull this one. So now I have another locator I can edit, right? So here we go. This is the drop. And if I want to, I can play with the angle, right? So I can say that when I'm dropping this up and down, it's going at an angle, right? But I can also change the amount. So where the rigging of Ozone is not normalized, right? We're dealing with independent weights that all layer and add on top of each other. We try to make our facial rigs specifically as normalized as we can, so that when an animator puts a value, say 100, it equals something that represents a shape that they expect, in this case, a mouth. What this does is, because we can tune our rigs to give 100 and an artistic result that's connected, if your character is 5 feet tall or you're a tiny little mouse, we can make the same animation files and values mean very similar, if not exactly the same things. So now you can build an animation library from one character and apply it to the next, get maybe 80%, tweak and tune that, and reuse work over and over and over again. It gives animation consistent results with certain values. Again, it doesn't stop them from driving something to 400 if they want, but it sets a standard for performance that can be reused from character to character. And it really comes down to just giving that value here, the ability to tune it. So in this case, let's say I want to set my drop to 100, right? And that's too far. I can look at my drop here and I can tune what 100 means. So now 100 is doing something like that, right? So anyway, ultimately, that's what these sections are. You got animation, you've got fitting, we got weights, and we have sculpts. Here, let me do this. I mean, I do want to bring up Zoe again. We'll see if Maya cooperates this time. So we'll dump this out of here. How we doing, Kai?
Hey, we're great, man. Great on time. Whenever
Okay.
you're ready, we got a couple questions queued up. One from Kyle, but we can take that later, maybe after you show Zoe. And
Yep, I'm gonna show
okay,
one. I'm
great.
gonna show one more thing with Zoe here real quick. It's my fault for having 5 Mayas running, so I could just switch between them. Didn't like that very much. So let's go ahead and open the scene back up. And then after I'm done with this, this will be it for this webinar. And then we can get into Q&A and people can ask questions. All right, so let's bring up our panel. Other elements of this, and we're going to get into like weighting tools and how the weight tools work and all kinds of fun stuff in future webinars. But here, let's go here. All right. So same idea that we saw in that other character, right? We have our different modules. Now, if we're looking at like a true human rig, I mean, there are thousands of options, right? Because you want to be able to give the tiniest little control. You don't have to deal with all 1,000 of those things at the beginning. They're all about working in an order, and we'll get into that too. But if we're thinking about this, if I hold the shift key here and expand it, you're going to see is just a tremendous amount of stuff and even though it's organized, it can be difficult to see and work with, right? Well, that's what we've done though, is to make this easier is we have a very quick filtering system. So let's say I want to look at my jaw again, right? I can type in jaw, it's only going to show me jaw. If I do -A, it's only going to show me the animation values. If I do -W, it's going to show me weights. -S sculpts. Let's say I don't want to see weights or that, but I want to see my default values, -D, or my F for my fitting. I can go here and say, well, I want UD, so I can add my UD in this. And now I'm looking at the jaw UD fit, the jaw UD sculpt factor, and the jaw UD locator. And let's say I want to add my weights, and I'll add my sculpts. You can really, really quickly drill down and find the things you want with this. And everything that you've got here, you can come and you can right click and say add to scratch panel. And then this panel becomes a temporary place for what you've worked on or what you want to work on that doesn't get affected by this filtering over here. So now you can literally, while you're working, say, I want to work on these 5 things. I want to see this Ava. I want to see it and move it around. Over here is your toolbox. Again, we're going to go into this in more depth in a later webinar. But like you have your weight effect tools. We can do sculpts. You can deal with your pulling and pushing fitting, how we'll manipulate joints, basically set their bind poses. And then a bunch of different operators that work across the board. So we'll get into that more. I'm being conscious of time, trying to keep this at that 45-minute mark. But anyway, that's kind of the last bit that I wanted to show there. We'll talk about fitting, we'll talk about weighting and sculpting specifically in a future webinar. We really go into the tools, how to manipulate them, why we'll do something, how it all works. But hopefully this is a good preview. So Q&A, and that's kind of it there. So let's bring it to questions. We'll do a little better on Friday. This is the very first time, so it's not as smooth as I'd like, but we'll figure that out.
Yeah. Real quick, Rich. So let me tell anyone who's viewing it, feel free to jump in, press the Q&A button, type in a message, and we'll make sure to get to those. But I think there's one that's queued up right now, and I know Jason took a little bit of a stab at it in the chat. But Rich, can I tee this up for you, and maybe you can help kind of answer it. So Kyle messaged over and said, I think while you were showing off the question was like, hey, how many deformers are in that face?
I don't know the exact number, but I believe it is close to 600 deformers in the face. If you look at everything that's available to you, because if you don't use it, then you don't have to pay the penalty for it. So when you think about a brow, right, you've got up and down, you've got left and right, you've got forward and backward, you've got individual twists and whatever, and each one of those is its own deformer. If you think about the lips, right, you've got curl, forward, backward, up, down, left, right, forward, back, and then each one of those directions has its own sculpt. Each sculpt is basically a blend shape with its own deformer. So yeah, I think there's like 600 or so deformers in the rig, and we're getting, when the panel's open, things slow down a little bit as it's processing data. But when the panel is shut, like that one little wing character, which is a character we're working on with the Henson Creature Shop, we're getting like 50 to 60 frames a second with subdivs on in Maya. So it's really, really fast. Even, we do as little work as possible, as often as possible to get these shapes. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah. Hopefully, Kyle, that answers that up. Hey, I got a shout out though in the live stream on YouTube. Aaron was watching you move the fitting like live on Pork Chop, and I think her exact comment was "OMG."
Yeah.
So
yeah, we'll get into that a little bit more, and we're gonna do this again on Friday, and I'm gonna go through this exact same thing again, hopefully a little bit smoother. So we'll learn from anything. So also any feedback on the webinar would be great, from format to what was covered to what maybe I missed or anything else. As a company, we feel very strongly about the best idea needs to win, which means we're going to listen to all the feedback you guys have and try to make things better and better. So anyway, if there aren't any more questions.
Yeah, maybe we can give it a 10-second countdown. All right, Matt said thanks for the webinar here.
Yeah, Matt, good to see you, buddy. Yeah, this sort of feels like a family event in a way, though. Rodney, I don't know you, so nice to meet you, Rodney and Marco, and Craig. Okay, seeing people that names that I don't recognize. And you're probably like, you know me from da da da. I'm old, so memory. Oh man, well, it's great. All right, so
Right on.
we'll get into it more. And just as a general where we are in the production of Ozone, we're very, very close to what we're considering sort of our 1.0 version. We are working with studios right now, and we're getting things validated and tested. And we're going to start opening up the beta very soon. So individuals will have a chance to play with this, give us feedback, and work with these rigs and these systems themselves. So just, that's coming, and we're close now. We're really close. Ah, yes, Rodney. See, now if I saw your face, I'd recognize you. Yep, you're coming. It's gonna be in your hands soon, buddy. It's gonna be in your hands soon. Anyway,
Right on.
great seeing everybody.
Hey, Rich, thank you again for walking us through the webinar as we close down here. Appreciate
Yeah, man,
it.
no problem.
All righty,
bye,
guys.
everybody.
Hey, we'll see you Friday. Bye.